When I was a young man, I carried my pack, and I lived the free life of a rover. From the Murray's
All right.
Basin
Welcome to
the
the History and Music Podcast. This is Scott Gifford, your host, and I'm joined by my awesome co-host, Sean. How's it going?
Could be better, but I'm happy to be here, man.
Oh, what happened?
Well, today I was working in the yard as I often do, and I was breaking apart some PVC pipe to put them in the garbage can, and a piece flew up and smacked me in the face, in the mouth specifically, split my lip open in 3 places, and broke 2 teeth. So I got
Wow.
back from I just got back from the urgent care like maybe an hour or two ago. Good news is I have both my legs and I can waltz Matilda.
Well, yeah,
So,
that is good news. I don't know
you
if
know,
Matilda will want to waltz with a toothless
Wonder.
Sean.
Yeah. Well, you got to look on the bright side, man. Bright side.
Yep.
White pilled.
Yep, totally. And we are also joined by Andrew Oborn from, I guess, for me, from Twitter. But how's it going, Andrew?
Good. Very happy to be here. I must say that the Himster campus, the History and Music fan campus, is enormous. My wife and kids have been having a really good time at the 4 water parks you guys have here, amusement parks, everything. It's just, I've been treated like royalty here. So it's been very nice to be here at the Himster campus. So thank you for having me.
Well,
We're glad you could make it out. Did you have any trouble with the valet?
No, Valley was great. The private jet you guys sent spared no expense. Absolutely fantastic. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
yeah,
Good.
we like to spoil our guests.
Yeah, we spare no
Yes.
expense.
Well,
Right.
and I mean, keep this up, and I may never leave.
That's okay.
Yeah, so I guess that's a perfect opportunity to invite any of you excellent listeners. If you'd like to join us on any of these episodes, you may or may not be flown out to a undisclosed location to help us out with this podcast and give us your excellent knowledge.
Would strongly recommend the steak and lobster I had for breakfast this morning was phenomenal.
Surf and turf. Okay. Yeah. If you like history and or you like music, or if you don't like history or music, actually, if you don't like history or music, we want you to come on the podcast.
Yeah, we talked to a lot of people, and they're all intimidated, saying, "You guys, like, I don't want to get on because I don't know much about history and music history." And it's like, first of all, it's not about music history; it's about the history that's contained within the music. And second of all, we study this like just a couple days before we're Wikipedia diving, so it's not like we're experts here anyway. So don't be intimidated. Come right in.
Yeah. And don't worry about looking like a Gomer because Scott and I will do that for free.
Yeah,
Can confirm.
I can confirm. Thank you. So Andrew, you're here with us. How's it going? How you doing?
Like I said, good. I have to keep the servants and valets away from here just so I can record this podcast. It's been wonderful.
Awesome.
But me
So,
personally, also doing well.
good. Let the people get to know you a little bit. What's your I guess what's your history with music? Like your taste? What do you like?
Tell us about yourself, man.
So yes, so as was mentioned, I'm a relative of the pod. Sean is my brother. Growing up, he's talked about his taste in music. My taste in music was not that.
This is true.
I'm also these 2 gentlemen have talked about these chats on Twitter that I am also not a part of. So I'm definitely an outsider here. My taste in music largely is weird and random and all over the place. But one thing that I return to oftentimes again and again is kind of this folk punk style, like Flogging Molly, Dropkick Murphys, Pogues, those types of guys.
I think that comes naturally with being a redhead.
awesome.
Like when you're a redhead, you just gravitate to anything that's Scot Irish in any form.
That's true.
Yeah. So that's the question. Did you consciously lean into that, or is it just like a natural pull?
It's who I am, I guess.
Nice.
In your
Yeah.
blood.
That's good to hear.
It's in my blood, and I'm a contrarian by choice and nature, I suppose. So this is the style of music that's usually contrary to popular stuff, I guess. I mean, it's not always what's in, if that makes sense.
Very punk rock.
Sure.
Yes.
Specific kind of punk rock too. I always appreciate the pipes, the bagpipes in accompanying any
It
punk
stirs
rock
something
song,
in
so
the
that's awesome.
soul.
It really does.
It does. Something deep down. All right, so
Have you? What kind of music have you guys been listening to lately? We talk about this sometimes, Scott. But what have you guys been listening to recently, besides the Pogues? I feel bad. I always put Scott on the spot. He's like, "Quick, crap! Let me pull up my Spotify real quick and find out the last 10 songs I listened to."
no, that's exactly
I mean,
what
I
I'm
could
doing.
tell you right now, my kids get really into music, and lately my children have requested on repeat the song from The Hobbit, "Misty Mountains Cold." Whether they're singing it, piano, or anything, they don't care. They really like it.
Based.
So that's been on repeat.
My boys
That's
tell me to
awesome.
play that whenever it's
Based
like
in
rainy or
Dwarvenpilled.
Based in Hobbit pilled. Actually, they are dwarves. You're right. So it is dwarven pilled. Whenever it's like misty or foggy or rainy outside, my boys do the same thing. They want to play. Dad, play that Misty Mountain song. And as a joke, I'll be like, "Oh, Misty Mountaintop," and I'll play some Led Zeppelin. Like, no, not this one. But
Nice.
I guess on that same theme, I like to sing hymns to my kids.
History and Music
Putting them to
podcast
bed.
based.
And yeah. No.
He's singing our own podcast lines.
Although
to his kids.
my son recently asked me, he's like, "Do all dads have podcasts?"
Actually,
no,
you
but
should
they
have said
should.
yes, because they probably do. At least our generation. Do all dads have podcasts? Yes, son, they do. One day you can have a podcast.
I know. And what's funny is like 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, it was everyone started a band. Now everyone starts a podcast.
Yeah.
It is easier to be a podcast, I think.
Yeah, that's true, because you have to have a lot less talent to do what we do.
That's.
Yeah,
I mean,
we can just
I'm
ramble.
willing to start a band. Can't sing, can't play anything, but I'm there if you are.
Yeah.
Sweet.
If you can play cowbell.
Yeah.
Got it.
Anyway, so I sing hymns to my kids, and they've been really into Battle Hymn of the Republic.
It's a good one.
So I've been singing that every night.
And Civil War song. That's a good one.
It is really good.
I've been listening to a lot of Gunship lately.
Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I like Gunship. That
Yeah.
one song. What's that
Yeah.
one song?
The one about the nuclear Armageddon war.
Yeah.
The one narrated by John Carpenter in the beginning.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's a good one. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but that's like that's one of their popular ones. It's a good one.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of bands nobody cares about anymore, Blink-182 has a new single out. I don't know if you've listened
Yeah.
to it, Scott, but I listened to it the
I
other
have.
day. It's funny because the song's called Edging, and it came out literally 3 days ago, and it sounds like the lyrics sound like old Blink, like a lot of swearing in there. But when you listen to Tom sing, it doesn't sound like his voice anymore. It sounds like they've definitely matured. It's not like that. Where are you? It's definitely a little more.
He's got auto tune going.
He's got the auto tune.
He's been made fun of so much for that Tom DeLonge voice that I think he's trying to. I don't know. I know. I disliked that song though. I don't know. I actually tweeted
you disliked it.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Oh, geez, man. I'm sorry. I didn't even see your tweet.
Is the podcast going to break up, and am I here to see it?
over a Blink song.
There are so many tweets flying around. Although, yeah, it would be fitting that we break up over a Blink song because
Bro, you don't like Blink?
I give them 18 months and they're done.
Although the last song you posted in the chat was a Blink song, by the way.
Yeah, it was because they announced that they were releasing it was like the day before when they announced that it was coming out. I was excited.
Yeah, I saw that because they're doing a tour, and then you posted that song. I was like, dude, the party song? I haven't heard this song since I was like 16. But yeah. And then I saw they had. I was working in the garden, and I saw they had a new single, so I listened to it. I was like, okay, I can roll with this.
Yeah,
I won't listen to it around my kids, but
for sure. Yeah, that's kind of the sad thing with Blink is you have to be selective of when you're listening if you have kids.
Yeah. Anyway, so
we digress.
No, it's okay. It's part of the experience, man. So the song we're talking about today is, and this is the name of the song, and the band played Waltzing Matilda. Now, Andrew, you suggested this song. So
Yes.
The song was originally written in 1971 by a guy named Eric Bogle or Bogle. I think it's Bogle. The version that we're doing is one that came out in 1985 by the Pogues. They're fairly similar, but that's just a little bit of background on the song. So you suggested this song. I'm familiar with it. I had heard of it before as well. I actually had suggested it as well. And then when you suggested it too, we thought, oh, let's just have both Oborns come on and just dominate the podcast. So why'd you pick this song?
Sorry, Scott.
Every week.
So why'd you pick this song? What's your experience with this song, the Pogues, Eric Bogle, or what have you?
So I was an Eric Bogle bro before I knew I was an Eric Bogle bro. Yeah, Bogle bro. Reason being is he's written.
It's definitely not true.
Yeah, yeah, he's written a couple of songs that I really like that I didn't know that he had written. This being one, and a lot of his songs have had covers done by the Pogues, Dropkick Murphys, and similar ilk. And some of those songs were ones that I liked, and I didn't know that he was kind of the culprit until a few weeks ago when I was researching to submit, to the pod some of my recommendations, and that's when I found out, oh, hey, there's this Eric Bogle guy who's actually not Australian, by the way. So that's my history with him. The Pogues, honestly, it's just onesie twosies. This is the song that I like the most by them, the one that I listen to the most, and I probably couldn't name any others off the top of my head right now.
My one of the songs I'll say my wife brought into the marriage because I wasn't familiar with the song beforehand, but there's a song by the Pogues. It's a Christmas song called "The Fairy Tale of New York" or "Fairy Tale of New York City," something like that. And it's a duet between the Pogues and this chick named Kirsten McNichol or something like that, some other singer. But it's a Christmas song about Christmas in New York City, but it's kind of funny because they say some not kosher words in the song. but we listen to it. But my wife plays it basically every Christmas because it's kind of a funny sort of Irishy kind of Christmas song.
Nice. I'll have to look that one up later.
Yeah. So I had heard of this song. For those that don't know, our mother, mine and Andrew's mother, served her mission in Australia. So when she came home,
Hi, Mom.
Shout out, Sister Oborn. So when she'd talk about our mission, she would often talk about just sort of Australianisms and idioms, and because she served in Sydney, Australia, and the song and the band played Waltzing Matilda is written by a guy who was in Australia at the time, although not Australian, but it's kind of an Australian song about an Australian soldier. And the song and the band played Waltzing Matilda references an actual Australian song called Waltzing Matilda, if anyone can follow that at all. So the song Waltzing Matilda is an Australian song from like 1895, written by an Australian guy. And the song we're talking about today references that song.
That song is a kind of a pseudo-patriotic song in Australia as well.
Yeah, it's sort of like their Yankee Doodle, I guess, or like their, My Country 'Tis of Thee, where it's not their national anthem, but it's kind of their unofficial national anthem. And the song Waltzing Matilda, because I was as I was going through the catacombs in my various libraries in preparation for this show, the song Waltzing Matilda was originally just a poem that this guy wrote, and the author is a guy named Banjo Patterson. It was, again, Australian, wrote it in 1895, and it's what they call a bush ballad. I think to us it'd be like what we consider like a country song or like a trail song or something like that, where it's kind of like sort of like their version of country basically, but 1895, so it's more like a folk song. But this guy was Australian, and I thought when I was reading about this guy that wrote Waltzing Matilda, Banjo Patterson, I thought he'd be some kind of like hillbilly, backwoodsy guy from the outback. The guy was an academic and a journalist, actually. So, sorry about that. But he kind of wrote this song, Waltzing Matilda. And if you listen to the original Waltzing Matilda, we won't play it, but we can reference it in the show notes. It's like 150% Australian. It's got so many Australian isms and slang in there that you almost don't know what they're singing about, because he's singing about like being near a billabong in a coolabah, leaning next to a coolabah tree, waiting for your billy to boil, and you're waltzing Matilda across the outback. And you're like, what does any of that mean?
And you shove a jumbuck in your tucker bag.
Yeah, you shove a jumbuck in your tucker bag.
Whoa!
And
Can we say that?
The squatter comes on his thoroughbred, and you jump in the billabong. And it's like, what? It's like he's trying to communicate with me.
We're gonna have to mute a bunch of those words, I think.
Yeah.
Well, none of them are curse words. They're all just freaking Aussie slang,
It sounds vaguely inappropriate.
Sounds vaguely wrong.
So we have to be careful here, otherwise the entire continent of Australia might start attacking the Hemster campus.
That's true.
But we love Australia, our friends down under.
There's actually boomerangs hitting the window now as we speak.
It's really weird. I can hear a didgeridoo in the distance.
Wow. It's their battle cry.
It's all right. We'll get our bagpipes out and we'll counter it with this song. Anyway,
so what I was getting at on this one, and I'll finish it here, is that so this guy, his name's actually Andrew Patterson, but he wrote the poem anonymously. And the author at the time he wrote it, he wrote the author as The Banjo, which was a name of like his favorite mule or something as a kid. But the whole idea of this song is it's a guy or favorite instrument. Yeah. So it's a guy who is the original song Waltzing Matilda is about what they call a bagman, who is basically just a sort of a transient wanderer, hobo. Is probably what we'd call him. Swagman. And they basically wander the outback, just sort of camping and living off the land. And the waltzing Matilda is a term that means a specific thing, which is he's carrying his bedroll and his tent stuff with him on his back. And if you think like the old Looney Tunes shows when they'd like quote unquote pack up or whatever, and they'd have like a stick with a polka dot bag on the back with like all their bed in it. That is the exact thing that he's talking about. Waltzing Matilda literally means wandering through the outback carrying something like that.
Are you serious?
It doesn't mean a dance at all.
Matilda's the name of the pack. Like
Matilda's the name of that thing on his back. Waltzing refers to wandering or walking through the outback. And no one knows where these words come from. It's just Australians being Australians.
They're ridiculous, I swear.
Aussie bros stay winning.
Stay winning. Yeah. British sales stay
mad.
I just lost it. Stay mad, yeah. Stay seething. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so that's the song, and so the idea is it's a purely Australian song from 1895, and it's been popular ever since. It's been covered a gazillion times. Every Australian knows it, and it's played. The song "Waltzing Matilda" is played at a lot of just Australian events to celebrate Australianness, if you will, and so it's sort of like the symbol of Australia.
Got it.
A good cover of it. That's pretty modern. Slim Dusty, Australian guy, does a very good job. So if you want to do some homework himsters out there, go listen to that.
All right, these are some good names. We got Banjo. We got Slim.
Yeah, Slim Dusty is like an Australian like singer, songwriter, folk ballad kind of guy, and his version of the song was actually broadcast from the Columbia shuttle to Earth.
Based.
But yeah, one last thing I'll add because you know me, I'm a fun fact kind of guy. Banjo Patterson, the guy that wrote Waltzing Matilda, wrote one other poem which everyone may be familiar with. And this poem is from 1890, so it's even older than Waltzing Matilda, and it's called The Man from Snowy River, which the movie The Man from Snowy River, or the show, is based on this dude's poem because the guy used to live in Snowy River. So,
my sister is named Jessica, and she's named after that movie, the girl in that movie.
Oh, no way?
Yeah. My mom loves that movie.
So Snowy River Bros, there you go. There's your origin right there. Man from Snowy River. Same guy that wrote Waltzing Matilda wrote Man from Snowy River.
Cool. I'm going to share that. I'll share that fun fact with my mom.
Nice. Sister
Unfortunately, I don't think she listens. Maybe I'll make her listen to this one.
Say, Mom, you got to listen to it. There's a bombshell you got to listen to in the pod.
Yeah. Tell her there's an Easter egg in the podcast for her.
I will.
So that's Waltzing Matilda, and that is a lot of preamble crap to get to, and the band played Waltzing Matilda.
Some good context. Lots of it.
Yeah. So, how do you guys want to do this? I've given quite a bit of context already. Should we kind of give
I
a
think
slight
honestly,
background on the song itself, or what?
if we jump into the lyrics, the first verse gives its time and place and what's going on in the world.
Sweet. I will say this, the only preamble I'm going to say on this song. The song was written by Eric Bogle, who's, as we discussed, who's actually from Scotland. He's a Scottish guy who went to Australia in his like mid-20s and wrote this song kind of shortly after coming to Australia. So I think he's considered an honorary Australian, but he's not actually Australian, but he does live in Australia. He wrote it in Australia about Australia.
He's lived there for some time.
Yes. And the song that we're talking about and the band played Waltzing Matilda itself was written in 1971. So it's not from the era of World War I, but we'll kind of get to that.
Actually, you know what? Here's some more preamble stuff before we even get there. When he wrote this song, a lot of people were thinking that he was talking about what was going on in the world at that time, what conflict was going on. Vietnam. Yep. So a lot of people thought he was talking about Vietnam. And he was, but he was using World War I to do it because this song is, spoiler alert, an anti-war song. So not just about World War I and the horrors of World War I, but about all wars. And you know, with Vietnam being fresh in the world's mind at that time when it was written.
Yeah, he said he got the idea for this song because he said he was always Eric Bogle always said he was a fan of World War I, and when he was a kid, like in the 50s, he bought a bunch of like World War I like books and just read them all, and he learned all about Gallipoli and all this stuff, and so he was always kind of like a World War I, appreciator. But he, shortly after getting to Australia, he watched a military parade. And at the time, the Vietnam War was going on, and sort of the idea for this song just came to him. This idea of a soldier being sent away to war, coming back sort of like a broken man, and thinking about what was it all for. But rather than setting it in Vietnam War, the current conflict, he put it in World War I. But Andrew's right, yeah. So it's supposed to kind of reference the Vietnam War, but a lot of what he talks about, though, is very true to life for people that were in, frankly, both wars. But without further ado, Andrew, since you suggested this song, do you want to kind of read the first stanza there?
Yes. So the first, and in this song, there's no real chorus. There's just a single line that repeats, but we'll get there. So the first line goes, "Now when I was a young man, I carried me pack, and I lived the free life of a rover. From the Murray's green basin to the dusty outback, well, I waltzed my Matilda all over. Then in 1915, my country said, son, it's time you stopped rambling, there's work to be done. So they gave me a tin hat and they gave me a gun and they marched me away to the war."
Yeah, 1915, war. There's only one war going on at that time, and that's the Great War. It had been going on for a year at this time because it started in 1914.
Yep, and it gives you where he's coming from, just saying the outback.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I think the Murray's Green Basin is just a different part of Australia that's green as opposed to the outback, which is kind of like
I looked it up. It's a geographical area. It's a geographical area where kind of rivers come together and empty out into two major basins, the Murray and the Darling rivers.
Yeah, and it says, I waltzed my Matilda all over. So that you would think he's talking about, oh, I was dating this girl named Matilda, or we were married and I was dancing with her everywhere. He's actually just talking about being kind of a rover, as he says, a wanderer who's wandering the outback with his Matilda, his knapsack or his bag, basically on his back. The Matilda is his bag. And the waltzing refers to wandering.
All right, so that makes sense. The line where it says, son, it's time you stop rambling. There's work to be done. So that didn't really fit as well when I thought it was just being with the dancing.
Stop walking around with the woman and come. Well, something that's interesting about this too is, at least in this point, and I'm not a World War I historian, but I don't think that there was a draft in the British Empire at the time. So, Sean?
Initially there was not, but then they did initiate a draft, I believe, later on in the war because, spoiler alert, everybody died and they ran short of men.
So at this time there wasn't.
Well, but the thing is this is Australians, right? So they're still part of the Commonwealth at the time. But from what I was studying, the Australians never had the draft here. Australians were 100% volunteer in this war.
Yes. So that line, "It's time you stop rambling, there's work to be done," people have taken issue because that sounds like, oh, there was a draft, even though there wasn't. But I can imagine big countries advertising for the young men to go to war and making it attractive for them.
Yeah,
Um,
that was a
and plus,
that was a big thing, was their tactics on how they sold the war, and how they got guys to sign up. They would like sign up together. Your neighborhood can sign up together. All your boys you grew up with can go out together
Yeah,
and fight a
your
war
school
type thing.
class. And
Yeah.
well, what they'd also do is they'd have the young women.
Mhm.
The British Empire did this. They'd have like the single young gals go out, and if you were a young man that was like able-bodied and not in uniform or hadn't enlisted, they'd give you a white feather to basically say that you're a coward. You're
Yeah.
showing cowardice.
Yeah.
So
very.
yeah. The other thing too, for the history cells out there, it says they gave him a tin hat. They actually didn't. They were not using helmets at this time in the war, so they did not have a tin hat. Just a fun fact.
Yes. So as we go on in this, I think it's important to note that the song is written retrospectively. At the end of the song, he's speaking more like it's more current in his life. He's reminiscing, or not reminiscing. He's remembering what's going on at this time of his life. And so when he says it's time you stop rambling, there's work to be done. In my mind, that's like a callback to, like we had mentioned earlier, just the advertising and the government's just strongly recommending the young men to go out there and enlist.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, this is a guy that didn't. It seems like he's a single guy who didn't have any other prospects. He was literally wandering through the outback. Like just camping out basically.
Well, with the song Waltzing Matilda being as popular as it is, I wonder, and I don't know this, maybe some Australian thoroughbred can answer this, but was this a popular thing at that time and before? Because I imagine, World War I was kind of the coming of the 19th century into the 20th century, and a lot of things changed in that war and after. But I wonder if like he says, living the free life of a rover was a more popular thing amongst young men or young people, or just people in general at that time.
I think it was. I know that from my research, it was a thing. They don't really do it so much anymore, but it was really popular during like economic downturns. So during Australia's like Great Depression, for example, that's kind of what dudes would go do. Like, oh, there's no jobs. I'll just go live in the outback and get my billy can and boil it over a fire and kind of live off the land, so to speak. And this is basically that era, but maybe it was a popular thing to do. I don't know. That's interesting.
Popular enough, I guess.
Yeah. But the song goes on to say, and the band played Waltzing Matilda as the ship pulled away from the key. It's spelled quay, but pronounced key. And it says, and amidst all the cheers, the flag waving and tears, we sailed off for Gallipoli. So there's he's Australian sailing for Gallipoli. Gallipoli, for those who don't know, is in modern day Turkey. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But that's where it is. It's specifically the Gallipoli Peninsula, which is an extremely narrow peninsula that the British and what they call the ANZAC soldiers, ANZAC is Australia New Zealand Army Corps, attempted to take from the Turks, or at this time they were called the Ottoman Empire.
Right. Very strategic place to get.
Yeah. So that was like that's kind of like sort of the chorus. So yeah, amidst all the cheers, the flag waving and tears, we sailed off for Gallipoli. That's Gallipoli. Scott, do you want to take the next little verse? We don't have to read this whole thing.
Real quick before we do that, I think that third line, amidst all the cheers, the flag waving and tears, that line is very important, because later on in the song, we see the inverse of that, and we'll get there. And I was going to talk about Gallipoli for a minute, but we've already gone a long time. The Gallipoli campaign was terrible. So
but we're still getting there. The Gallipoli campaign is just starting, bro. At this point,
yes.
Yep, that's kind of the meat of the song, I think, the Gallipoli stuff.
Oh yeah, totally. So Scott, do you want to do the next verse, like and how well I remember that terrible day?
Yep, and how well I remember that terrible day, how our blood stained the sand and the water, and of how in the hill they called Suvla Bay. We were butchered like lambs at the slaughter. Johnny Turk, he was waiting. He'd primed himself well. He showered us with bullets, and he rained us with shell. And in 5 minutes flat, he'd blown us all to hell, nearly blew us right back to Australia.
Okay, so the reason why he's wording it this way is because history cells know Gallipoli for Australians and New Zealanders is basically their D-Day. Like our D-Day, we were watching Saving Private Ryan, where it's like this massive like loss of life, super traumatic.
Big amphibious
amphibious
attack.
landing, kind of this hopeless kind of attack, That's basically Gallipoli, but worse.
Because they failed, essentially.
Yes, because number one, they didn't get any objective. The Ottomans won in the end, and at least in I was going to say element of surprise, but no one had the element of surprise. But they a couple of things to call out here. It says that they're in this hell called Suvla Bay. Suvla Bay is one of the bays or beaches near Gallipoli. There was some action there, but that's not actually where they landed. The place they landed is a place they literally call ANZAC Cove. So that's just a minor thing. He said the reason why he wrote Suvla Bay in there is because it was easier to rhyme that. But he also said because at the time he wrote it, there was a sort of a general misunderstanding from Australians that that's where all the action happened. And it wasn't until later they learned it was actually at ANZAC Cove. But it says Johnny Turk, he was waiting, referring to the Turks, obviously, the Ottomans. What he's referring to here is part of the reason why they selected this strategy, because the Gallipoli campaign was like a 10-month campaign on the Gallipoli Peninsula, and it started in February of 1915 all the way to January of 1916. But the main amphibious landings were in April, and the idea was Winston Churchill had some faulty intel on the situation, and it was thought that the Ottomans / Turks were not good soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have very many men. They were under-equipped, understaffed, undergunned, everything. And that there was a total surprise. There was going to be a surprise, and that no one would know that the Brits and the Anzacs are coming. And they basically just kind of catch them with their pants down. That was kind of the idea, based on the intel that Winston Churchill had. Turns out when they got there, none of those things were true. The Turks knew they were coming and knew like months in advance. They had so much time to prepare, it was embarrassing. And so they had like gun emplacements trained on exactly where these guys were going to land. They had barbed wire set up so they couldn't get over. They had trenches dug. They had like reserve trenches dug. They had like 16 divisions that were there on this peninsula. So it ended up being just a complete bloodbath for the Brits, because they arrive and the Turks know they're there, and they already have their guns aimed down onto the beaches. And so you've kind of seen Saving Private Ryan, where they're sort of almost like kind of running up the beach, and there's like these heights kind of above where the Germans are shooting from. Gallipoli is that on steroids. It's like actual mountains. Like there's a very small beach, which is like 1,000 feet wide, 2,000 feet wide, super, super small beaches. And they basically go a couple hundred feet in to almost like a straight cliff face that's covered in like these like thorns and briars and bushes. And these Australians have to like scale that somehow as they're getting shot and blown to pieces by artillery. It's just complete nightmare situation. And so
in the words of Dan Carlin, a friend of the pod, a meat grinder.
A meat grinder, exactly right. So like, just to give you some perspective, one of the plans for the Brits or the Anzac soldiers to attack is they had this ship there called the SS River Clyde, and it was basically like a ship they kind of requisitioned. It wasn't a battleship; it was like a transport ship they requisitioned for the war, and they cut holes in the side of it. And the idea is to basically turn this thing into like I don't know if you'd call it like almost like a armored beachhead landing thing. Because the idea was they were gonna beach the ship on the shore, and then the guys were gonna run these gangplanks, these gangways out the sides of the holes in the ship they had carved in there, and they'd come out the side of the ship and then attack the beaches and kind of have like this sort of covered assault on the beaches.
Right.
Well, that happened. They beached the ship, and the guys got out. And I was just reading about this last night, actually. Of the, let's see, I believe it was of the 500 men that came out of there, 21 actually made it to the beach.
Oh my goodness.
Because the Turks saw them there and quite literally just trained a machine gun right on where they were running out and just mowed them
bottleneck.
all down. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's when we can't understate how like brutal this was for these guys. I mean, like I said, like Saving Private Ryan, we've seen that, right? I mean, that's D-Day. That was brutal for us, but that was a little bit more of a fair fight. This was so one-sided that the attack, at least, that it was like just complete hell for these men.
And the problem, what really sucks is that the Brits and ANZAC, they thought it would be a slam dunk. Like they really did think they'd just go in and sweep them.
They thought it was going to be a cakewalk.
They didn't even like sweep for mines in the water. Like they didn't do anything. Like their initial attack, they going into the strait that gets them into like going towards Istanbul. I think they lost like 6 ships or something. Like initially.
Oh, the Dardanelles. Yeah, we didn't even talk about the Dardanelles. So
they had to like retreat and then go hit the other beaches on the north side of Gallipoli. So it's like they totally screwed up.
And the part of the reason they're doing this is because the Ottomans at that time, the Ottoman Empire is now Turkey. They don't exist anymore, but they were considered like the dead man of Europe. They were basically like this 600-year-old empire that was sort of dying and kind of a has-been. And they weren't in the war yet, but they were sort of blocking the approach to Russia and to Germany. And so the idea from the Allies was, well, let's just punch through where Istanbul is because it's so narrow right there that you can get some ships through there and it's pretty easy to kind of, get through there. And so the British had this bright idea to quite literally like run a gauntlet, because the Dardanelles in some areas is only a mile wide. It's very narrow, and it goes right through Istanbul and other areas. And so their idea was, I've got it. Let's take all of our old obsolete ships from like the last war and just try and straight up run them through the Dardanelles. And so they have all these old like coal burning steamers from like the 1800s basically. And they had some modern ships there, but they had the because the Turks had so much advance warning this was happening, they heavily mined the path through the Dardanelles, and they had a bunch of mine, what do they call them? Like the mine layer ships. The Brits had them where they get rid of the mines, like the ships that pick up
minesweepers.
Minesweepers. Thank you. They had minesweepers, but the minesweepers the Brits had were all crewed and manned by civilians. So during the initial Dardanelles attack, once the Turks started firing on the ships, all the minesweepers crewed by these civilians fled the scene.
Oh.
And so like basically every ship that the French and British threw at this gauntlet of mines and ships and mortars and everything else, none of them made it. Not one made it.
Yeah, they all retreated.
It was just
almost immediately.
Yeah, it was just complete slap in the face.
Well,
and then after that, they're like, well, let's try Gallipoli.
And to I guess get into like more of like the story of this soldier. He's going into this not like trusting, right? He's trusting the intel that his leadership is giving him, but they're more focused on the Western Front anyway. And so this is just supposed to be like, all right, go take care of this. We need to go sure up the Ottoman over here. And so they just got screwed over.
Yeah. Well, this is also a transition period in the Great War, because for the first like 6 months to a year of the Great War, it was very mobile warfare. People were still using cavalry of all things, doing cavalry charges with sabers and all kinds of crazy stuff, like old school warfare, because they hadn't quite grasped how deadly machine gun fire and artillery fire can be. Yeah. And it hadn't. And so in basically 1915 is kind of when the Great War became trench warfare that we all know that it's known for, right? So Gallipoli sort of was happening during this transition period, but before everyone realized it. And so I think that's the other reason too, is still like, all right, men, with a lot of go get them, you guys can charge up this mountain here and take this objective. And it's just ended up how every other battle in World War I ended, where it's like, okay, yep, everyone is dead and nothing was accomplished.
Yep.
Okay.
Unless you're hiding in a trench, like you're gonna just get mowed down by machine guns.
Yeah, no chance at
And
all.
so that's what ended up happening, was just like they just like trenched and held their line on the beaches, right?
Yep, that's why the Gallipoli campaign is 10 months long, and at the end they made it like, I think, a half mile or a mile in. That's it. And they were supposed to go like 5 miles in.
Well, and on top of this, like apparently the British leadership was like non-existent once they got there. Like they didn't know what to do, and so the guys would like trench in, and all they could do was sit there and wait, and just like, I guess, slowly diminish as their guys get slowly killed by artillery as well as machine gun fire. And so like they're just sitting there like, what are we supposed to be doing? And the British just like the leadership just completely dropped the ball.
Yeah. Well, and what ends up happening here is they're sitting there for so long that it becomes from the cold months to the hot months, and all these dead bodies, thousands of them, hundreds of thousands of them, just laying out there, not able to be buried, start contracting every kind of disease.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you've got like tens of thousands of guys who get just super sick and start dying of disease and have to get evacuated out of there because of it's just so unclean, so unsanitary that like the British had almost 80,000 men evacuated for just sickness from that. The French had 20,000 men evacuated for just sickness.
It's insane.
Like this isn't even like war wounds or, anything else or shell shock, just sickness because it was so unsanitary there from all the dead bodies in the air and all the flies that come as a result of that. But
you hear about this, like this trench warfare, like inland, right, on like the French-German border, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But doing it on a beach like this, I feel like it'd be a whole different animal. It's similar, but you think it's a little bit different. Anyway,
yeah,
we can keep going.
So let's keep going though. Andrew, do you want to take the next line? We don't have to go this whole thing, like I said, because it's a fairly long song, but.
So I'm gonna read the next. It's a semi-chorus. But the band played Waltzing Matilda when we stopped to bury our slain. We buried ours and the Turks buried theirs. Then we started all over again. While you guys were talking, I was looking up some statistics. So on the first landing day, there was about 16,000 ANZAC, which is Australian and New Zealanders, who landed. And at the end of the day, 2,000 of them died, which is 1/8. 1/8 of the Australian and New Zealanders were killed just in that one day, not including any other casualties from injury or whatever. And it only gets worse for them from there.
At the end of the campaign, the Australian soldiers alone, just Australia, not even New Zealand, just Australia, suffered 50% casualties. That means half their guys are dead or wounded.
So when he says in 5 minutes flat, they've blown us all to hell, that's like not. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not that much.
Not much.
Okay.
No, not really.
One thing. Sorry, I'm going to shut up after this. But where it says when we stopped to bury our slain, we buried ours. The Turks buried theirs. That actually happened. So after the first few bits of fighting, and the death toll was so bad that they literally called a small truce just on this battlefield just to bury their dead. And it's very reminiscent of the Christmas truce from 1914, where everyone kind of stopped fighting for Christmas. Very similar situation here, where the Turks and the Brits and the Anzacs basically kind of called a temporary truce just to go bury all their dead. So they did that. They kind of waved the Turks a little bit, kind of shared some small camaraderie moments, and then right the next day went right back to killing each other again. It's very, very interesting. And it kind of happened sort of arbitrarily, just randomly. So keep going, Andrew. Yeah.
Okay. The next verse. And those that were left, we tried to survive in that mad world of blood, death, and fire. And for 10 weary weeks I kept myself alive, though around me the corpses piled higher. Then a big Turkish shell knocked me, I don't know if that's arse or ass, whatever it is,
It's arse.
overhead. Arse. And when I woke up in me hospital bed and saw what it had done, well, I wished I was dead. Never knew there were worse things than dying.
Keep
Something I
going,
want
bro.
to point out here: the Pogues change 10 weary weeks to 7 long weeks, and I tried to figure out why. And when I was researching, the best thing I could come up with was during the entire Great War, World War I, the average life expectancy of a soldier was 6 weeks. So I'm not sure if that's this guy beating the odds a little bit in the average life expectancy over the entire war, or if it has any significance at all.
That's crazy. Well, and the actual campaign was 10 months. But
Yes.
10 weeks is a long time in this war. It's a very long time to not die.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
so- and
typically
then
they'd at least like
Cycle 'em out,
cycle
yeah.
them out like the front lines. But
When the corpses piling higher line reminds me of what you said, that the bodies rising and rising and rising, and they can't bury them fast enough.
Yeah, by the time they got around to burying him, some of them were already skeletons.
Yep. So continuing on, for I'll go no more waltzing Matilda, all around the green bush far and free. To hump tent and pegs, a man needs both legs. No more waltzing Matilda for me.
Yeah. So it goes on to kind of explain it in more detail, but what happened here is a Turkish shell, so Turkish artillery, exploded next to him. He's knocked unconscious, wakes up in a hospital bed, and both of his legs are gone. And he considers that a fate worse than death, and I think in a lot of ways he's probably right.
so I took that to mean that maybe it might have been a little above his legs too.
Yeah,
if
we're
you
not
get my
sure.
drift.
Yeah. Well,
If it's worse than hell, then
If you're thinking of Matilda as a woman, yes, but
yeah.
in the very beginning, he speaks very fondly of this free life of a rover, walking around the wilderness and living this free life,
That's
which
true.
he can no longer do.
Okay,
True.
that fits.
But if we're going with the Vietnam theme, there's a movie with a very young Tom Cruise called Born on the 4th of July. And in that movie, Tom Cruise is kind of this young, idealistic kid living in, middle America. And he goes off in a very patriotic way to go join the army. I think it's the army during the Vietnam War. And his whole thinking is, hey, guys, our dads went away to fight the Nazis and the Japanese in World War II. They came back as heroes. Now it's our turn. It's our chance, right? So he goes and enlists in the Vietnam War. Spoiler alert, he gets wounded in the war. Same exact thing. Loses his legs, comes back in a wheelchair. And one of the things that he bemoans, and he becomes like this bitter, broken man, but one of the things he bemoans later on in the movie is he never had a chance to be with a woman, if you will, and now that he has no legs or anything, that he never will, and that's kind of like his one regret in the movie. So and since this is kind of along with the Vietnam theme, Vietnam era, maybe both are true.
Yeah, I wonder if that movie
Dual meaning.
like kind of borrowed from this song a bit.
Maybe. But it says, so they gathered the crippled, the wounded, the maimed, and they shipped us back home to Australia. The legless, the armless, the blind, and the insane. Those proud wounded heroes of Suvla. And as our ship pulled into Circular Quay, or Quay, I looked at the place where me legs used to be, and thanked Christ there was nobody waiting for me to grieve, to mourn, and to pity. Circular Quay is a bay in Sydney, Australia, by the way. But then it goes on to say, but the band played Waltzing Matilda as they carried us down the gangway, but nobody cheered. They just stood and stared. Then they turned all their faces away. So here we've come full circle now, where the song Waltzing Matilda has sort of carried this guy through to hell and back, if you will, but it's no longer, waving flags and cheers. It's now embarrassment, shame, sadness, but the band is still playing Waltzing Matilda.
Yeah, and I think that's
the callback from the first. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, you're right. That is the callback, and it is flipped where they're leaving they're heroes for leaving, but then no one cares when they come back injured. But the line that says the legless, the armless, the blind, the insane. Insane is, I think, referencing the shell shock that happened to a lot of soldiers in World War One. It's akin to PTSD or something like that. That just the amount of artillery that landed around men, it drove them crazy. And the really sad part about it is when they came home, there's so little. It was such a new thing that, I mean, I'm sure soldiers came back with PTSD, but this was kind of a different flavor. The soldiers that came home were really looked down on for going crazy and being cowards and whatnot. But it was like actual like mental like damage that happened to these guys. Anyway, so interesting.
That's true.
Nerves.
That's true. In Australia, though, I did some research on this. They actually set up hospitals for every single one of these things. So if you're blind, there's a place for you. If you had no arms, there's a place for you. No legs. If you were shell shocked, there was a special hospital just for those people. Which
really?
I mean, and they would do activities and jobs and things for that specific group at each one of these locations, which I thought was that's actually really quite cool that Australia was able to do that, especially being a commonwealth in a small part of the war.
Yeah, and this is like it's hard to blame like general society for treating shell shock the way they did, because they're slowly learning what it was at the point, right? And because of this, we know now. But it's just horrible. You feel for the guys.
Yeah. Well, and Gallipoli is like, this campaign is kind of where the Australians and the New Zealanders came into their own, where this is kind of a turning point for them as a society. It's kind of where the idea of being Australian as an Australian, as opposed to being subject to the Queen or whatever, really came into being. And it's because of this. So we'll talk about this here in a minute, but this is where like being Australian, like the patriotic nationalist Australian sort of came into being, is because of this conflict and like pride and what they accomplished and what they went through. And same thing for the New Zealanders.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So let's see. We're actually almost done. We might as well just
the last verse.
Yeah, we always say that like it
we're going to do the whole thing. Reads every word.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think I've been doing a lot. Scott, you want to do the next one?
Yeah, we're in April.
So now every April.
Yeah. Okay. And now this is, sorry, just before we start, this is kind of, again, I feel like before and after, there's a lot of similarities to like Vietnam, and I think some of the that we talked about earlier, some of the things that he got wrong or that seem odd are probably pointing towards Vietnam, right, rather than World War One, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And again, maybe with this one as well. Anyway, I'll keep going. And so now every April I sit on my porch and watch the parade pass before me, and I see my old comrades, how proudly they march, reviving old dreams of past glories. And the old men march slowly, old bones stiff and sore, they're tired old heroes from a forgotten war. And the young people ask, what are they marching for? And I ask myself the same question. What are they marching for?
So every April that it refers to there, Australia has ANZAC Day, which is essentially originally for World War One. So ANZAC Day is basically our Memorial Day, and it has kind of turned into their Memorial Day, but originally started with these guys in World War One.
Got it.
And it's April 25th.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
April 25th.
Yeah, because that April 25th is like the first day, the first landing at Gallipoli. It was delayed due to bad weather, but April 25th is when they actually sort of came ashore for the first time. Both the Kiwis, the New Zealanders, and the Australians. And so after this war, they celebrated ANZAC Day, and so that was the big day for flag waving and parades and celebrating your nationalist spirit. And so when he's talking about every April, he's talking about literally ANZAC Day, when they're commemorating basically this battle. Now it's like Andrew said, like a Memorial Day kind of thing, where it's like every battle. But at the time, it was just this battle that you're commemorating every April, and they have the parades and all that.
Yep. There you go. So now he's an old bitter man with no legs.
The Pogues changed some lines here to make it more graphic. So here in the original, it says, "And the old men march slowly, old bones stiff and sore." The Pogues say that the men are tattered and torn. And the next line, they're tired old heroes from a forgotten war. The Pogues say they're forgotten heroes of a forgotten war.
Oh,
And I like that the forgotten heroes of forgotten war part. Oftentimes, World War One gets overshadowed by its big brother, World War Two, because of the horrors that we were taught, the Holocaust and everything else. Which, yes, those are horrors. Not to minimize that at all, but World War One, in my opinion, I mean, every man is assigned a war that they're obsessed with. I get just generic World War One. I don't have the Boer War, the Winter War, the Franco-French War, whatever it is. I think that World War One is one of those wars that nobody knows. It's truly forgotten. It was over 100 years ago, and people go, "Oh yeah, it happened a long time ago," but they don't know why. They don't know what it was for, and they don't know that it was just the biggest waste of human life for nothing.
right. And I think that the lack of like a true bad guy it's hard to latch on to a war where like the reasons for fighting are so convoluted type thing.
Yeah.
But
Well, and if you're talking about the Gallipoli campaign, we've been talking about this the whole time. The result officially was an Ottoman victory, so they lost.
Yes,
Military
failure.
So the quote unquote good guys, right? The Anzacs, the Brits, they lost this war. It was 10 months long. They also lost the Dardanelles campaign, which is a whole separate thing. But just for some idea on the scope here, the Allies, that's the Anzac, Australians, and the French. Or I'm sorry, the Anzacs, the French, and the Brits. They sent a total at the end of it, a total of 489,000 men to Gallipoli against like 300 something thousand that the Turks had. At the end of the day, the Brits alone, just the Brits, lost about 200,000 men. The Australians lost half their force. The New Zealanders lost basically half their force. The French lost like 9,000 killed and missing, 18,000 wounded, 20,000 evacuated sick. Like these numbers are just so large that you can't calculate. You can't fathom them.
I know, and you look at it on a map, and it's like it's like a decent sized battlefield, but it's not huge. So it's like they're just like pouring guys in, and they're dying. You just think about the landmass. It's not. I don't think it necessarily holds that many people.
Yeah, well, and it's just like every other foreign war we've had for the past 100 years. Where's Gallipoli? Where is it? Turkey? Okay, I can't even find it on a map.
Exactly.
Where is Vietnam? Where's Korea? It's the same kind of thing that everyone has. Like, we have that many men die on some place I can't even find on a map. That's insane.
And it also goes to show you, I mean, the tactic in World War One was largely, hey, you're going to run out of bullets before we're going to run out of dudes. So
attrition.
Go.
Yep, attrition.
Yeah.
It was attrition.
And in this case, obviously that was not. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're almost done with the song here, but so as Scott was saying, it says, and the young people ask, what are they marching for? And I ask myself the same question. But the band plays Waltzing Matilda, and the old men still answer the call. But as year follows year, more old men disappear. Someday, no one will march there at all. And then the very last line. Okay, sorry.
Before we get into that, yeah, I think that last little stanza there, someday no one will march there at all, goes back to the forgotten war part. These guys just died out and no one remembered anymore. And it's a sad truth that's happened with this war and this battle in particular, but the war as a whole.
And what's kind of unique, what's kind of, I guess, odd about that is they had already been forgotten about, and most of them, none of them were marching in these parades anymore at the time he wrote this song in the 70s.
Correct.
Right? That's still 1971. That's still like what, 50, 60 years after this battle took place. I mean, anyone would be a very old man, at that time. Yeah.
The last line,
Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say that the last versette of the song is actually also the last verse of the song Waltzing Matilda that we talked about at the beginning. I'm going to read it, and then I had an epiphany while I was reading it that I want to share. The last verse goes, Waltzing Matilda, who will come a waltzing Matilda with me? And their ghosts may be heard as they march by that billabong, who will come a waltzing Matilda with me? Now, in the song Waltzing Matilda, not this one, but the the one it references, the swag man is going to be arrested because he shoved a jumbuck into his tucker bag. A jumbuck's like a sheep or a lamb. Tucker bag is just his sack. And the police come to say, "Where is it? We're going to arrest you." And the swag man says, "You'll never catch me alive." He jumps into the billabong and drowns. And the last verse is this: "As you go by the billabong, you can hear his verse or his ghost sing or say, 'Who will come waltzing Matilda with me?'" And the lesson there is that the swag man would rather die than be arrested and be subject to his government. And the thought I had here was, this soldier, after he's gone through all of this, in my mind, it's the same thing. He would rather die than have gone through all this over again and serve his country in this way, because his ghost is now heard by the billabong. Who's going to come waltzing Matilda with me?
Interesting.
That is.
A billabong is a lake, by the way, in case anyone wants to
Or
know.
just a body of water.
Body of water in Australia, yeah.
It's also a sweet clothing line of
Yeah, sick.
yeah,
Yeah.
sponsorship.
Yeah, that's interesting. And my thought too is the Pogues doing this song, because this song is from the Pogues' second album in 1985. The Pogues are themselves a British band, but the singer of the Pogues, Shane, I forgot his name now.
I don't think
He's
they're
actually
Australian,
Irish. He's actually Irish. He was born in England, but his parents were Irish. And so my thought is maybe he's kind of just doing some jabs to the redcoats in there. I don't know. This whole idea of like dying for king and country, and they're like, not my king and country. I'm Australian. I'm Irish. I'm New Zealander. I'm not a Brit. I don't know your queen. Sometimes I wonder if maybe that's kind of what part of the theme here is, at least when the Pogues are singing it. Something else that is kind of interesting here is the writer of this song, Eric Bogle. He made it very clear in various interviews that this is an anti-war song, not an anti-soldier song. And it's like we talked about before, it's kind of talking about the Vietnam War, but he said it during the Great War. And the original reason he wrote this song was because there was a folk song writing contest in Australia right after he moved there in like the early 70s. And he wrote this song kind of just because he had this idea. He was at a military parade and he had this idea. He wrote the song, performed it at this folk festival, and the prize was a $300 Ovation guitar. And he ended up not winning the competition, but this song became like massively popular and kind of started like sort of this grassroots movement for this song. And other people started memorizing this song and playing it and recording it before he even knew about it. And so like he like go places and people had already heard the song or heard recordings of it from other people who basically heard him perform it that night or that day and played it later on, like in England or in other parts of the world.
Wow,
that's odd.
That is odd and impressive.
Yeah. That's really punk rock.
Yeah, and he never got the Ovation guitar.
I'm sure he can afford it.
It was a $300 guitar too. I mean,
it was $300 in 1971 though. So
that's like $20,000 a day or more.
It's probably Australian dollars though, so maybe it's like, I don't know, it's probably like $10.
Is it called the dollar or the?
Yeah, it's an Australian dollar. Yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. That was an awesome song. I'm really glad you chose that because, like you, I really enjoy World War I, and I think my interest in it spiked with Dan Carlin with his
Blueprint for Armageddon. That series, yeah, very very
so
well
good.
done. Yeah. We can't shill that series enough. I will say, sorry, Mom, it's another depressing one, another downer song that we did, but very powerful, very moving to listen to this song and just think about what like real men went through 100 years ago. And even though this, like Eric Bogle, not a vet, never served time in the military, but he's able to convey such a depth of emotion here of like this broken man who went through such a terrible war for literally no reason, really is amazing.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of your last episode of The Ordinary Men. In that one, ordinary men were creating, all kinds of atrocities. In this one, ordinary men went through all kinds of atrocities and all kinds of horrific things.
Yeah, and I mean he suffered it from the Ottomans, right? But he also delivered. He was a soldier, right? He shot back. So like it's just part of it, I guess. Anyway.
Oh yeah, the Ottomans lost 250,000 men. Like both sides. A lot of people consider this what they call a Pyrrhic victory, or it's a victory that's so costly that you couldn't win another victory because you've been so decimated by it. So that was the idea. Is yes, the Ottomans still won because the Allies never got any of their objectives, but it was so costly for both sides that both sides were just completely shattered.
Yeah.
And the war went on for 3 more years after this, which is just
it's an insane war. It's so crazy. And yeah, it's just the attrition model of like we're just gonna keep going until you run out of guys or we run out of bullets or whatever. It's insane.
Or until America steps in.
Well, by then everyone was like beat to a pulp and had like there were some.
I know, it's like, hey, what's up? We're America. We're fresh.
So America's like, hey guys, sorry we're late. Let's go ahead and just end this thing.
I heard you guys are fighting.
Yeah. Well, cool. Scott, any last minute thoughts or anything on this one, or Andrew, any last minute thoughts on this one?
I don't have any.
Andrew, you good?
Yeah, I'm good. I would for those listening at home, dig into World War I just a little bit, because I almost guarantee that most people have either family members that were directly involved or were affected by it in some way. Because, like Sean had mentioned, I mean, just the sheer loss of life. I mean, it completely changed demographics back at home and how everything happened going forward. This war transitioned the world from horse and buggy to automobiles and airplanes and machine guns. All those things happened like during this time frame. And so
because of this war.
Yeah, because of this war. And so this war, World War I, it was a turning point in the world's history, more than a lot of other wars were, simply because of just the leaps and bounds of technology, the style of fighting, and just the sheer loss of life.
Yep. Well, and this war is the exact reason why we have the Second World War. If this hadn't happened, this war here, or if it had ended differently, we wouldn't even had World War II.
Yeah, World War II is almost an extension. I mean, obviously it's decades later, but it's almost an extension.
Yeah.
Or if they just accepted Hitler into art school.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, it's the Vienna School of Art. Man, it's honestly their fault.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, I don't have any other thoughts there, but Andrew, thanks for suggesting this song and coming on the podcast. Is there anything that we always ask us of our guests, anything that you want to plug, advertise? Where can people find you if they want to follow you or get in contact with you for anything?
If you send up a smoke signal, I'll be able to see it. Yeah, I'm on Twitter. My @ is at Manly Fidelity. There, I do my best to be a coach for men who are trying to quit porn. So I'm more than happy to help anybody that's involved with that. My DMs are open.
Cool. A noble cause.
Yeah, noble cause, and we'll post that in the show notes as well in case anyone wants to follow you and get in contact with you. Other than that, Andrew, thanks for coming on, my bro. Scott, thanks for another great episode, and I think we'll let the song play us out, right?
Yes, sir.
When I was a young man, I carried my pack, and I lived the free life of a rover. From the Murray's green basin to the dusty outback, I waltzed my Matilda all over. Then in 1915, my country said, son, it's time to stop rambling, 'cause there's work to be done. So they gave me a tin hat and they gave me a gun, and they sent me away to the war. And the band played Waltzing Matilda as we sailed away from the quay. And amidst all the tears and the shouts and the cheers, we sailed off for Gallipoli. How well I remember that terrible day when the blood stained the sand and the water, and how in that hell that they call Suvla Bay, we were butchered like lambs at the slaughter. Johnny Turkey was ready, he primed himself well, he showered us with bullets and he rained us with shells, and in 5 minutes flat he'd blown us all to hell, nearly blew us right back to Australia. And the band played Waltzing Matilda as we stopped to bury our slain, and we buried ours and the Turks buried theirs, and it started all over again. Now those who were living did their best to survive in that mad world of dust, blood and fire. And for 7 long weeks I kept myself alive, all the corpses around me pile higher. Then a big Turkish shell knocked me arse over tit, and when I awoke in my hospital bed and saw what it had done, Christ, I wished I was dead. Never knew there were worse things than dying. And no more I'll go waltzing Matilda, so the green bushes so far and near, for the hang tens and pegs a man needs 2 legs. No more waltzing Matilda for me. So they collected the cripples, the wounded and maimed, and they shipped us back home to Australia. The legless, the armless, the blind and insane, those proud wounded heroes of Suvla. And as our ship pulled into Circular Quay, I looked at the place where me legs used to be, and thank Christ there was nobody waiting for me to grieve and to mourn and to pity. And the band played Waltzing Matilda as they carried us down the gangway, but nobody cheered, they just stood and stared, and they turned their faces away. And now every April I sit on my porch, and I watch the parade pass before me. I see my old comrades, how proudly they march, reliving the dreams of past glory. I see the old men, all twisted and torn, the forgotten heroes of a forgotten war. And the young people ask me, what are they marching for? And I ask myself the same question. And the band plays Waltzing Matilda, and the old men still answer the call. But year after year, their numbers get fewer. Someday no one will march there at all. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, oh, go a waltzing Matilda with me.
Oh, I forgot to talk about. There's actually a movie called Gallipoli, and it's Mel Gibson's first movie when he was Australian. It's from '81.
So just so you guys know, I expect royalties every time the word hymster is used.